All right. Thank you to those who joined us right on time or a little bit early this morning. Both of my clocks now say 9 a.m., so we'll go ahead and get started. And let me just double check that, yes, we are in fact recording this morning. All right. So hopefully you should all see my PowerPoint screen. And let me get my slides to play. There we go. Okay, so today's agenda, I will do, of course, our welcome, our regular mindfulness moment and introduction of presenters. After me, we will be hearing from Nate Davis, and he will be sharing information on human trafficking awareness and prevention. And after Nate will be Michelle Knight and Cathy Davis, and they will be helping us with information on how to respond to a crisis. So this morning, our mindfulness, I thought I would just go ahead and do a quick share out with the group and use the chat feature. And so if you could pop into the chat what you did over spring break, whether you got a spring break or not, I guess could be part of the answer to that question. But let me just add mine in here. And everybody else feel free to take a moment to do so as well. I'd love to know what everybody did to recharge and enjoy their spring breaks. Time with family. Oh, Susie, you're a nicer human than I. I went outside and hid in the garden as much as I possibly could. All right. Oh no, somebody was sick for their spring break. That does suck big time. I'm sorry to hear that. Nate, nice to know you're my nap buddy. That's an important feature with the refilling the cup for me. Carla Stevens, yes, enjoyed sleeping in. Any day that I don't have an alarm makes me a happy, happy soul. Let's see, we have a son and daughter who were active in the Navy who've come home for a break and visit. Oh, I bet that was some loving, hugging mom moments. I know I drive my kids nuts with all the hugs and loves. Oh, let's see. Renee got snow. Oh my gosh. You're not supposed to have snow in Mo. Oh, wait, you're in San Juan. That's crazy. All right. And wrote essays for school. Good job, Jessie Ann. Way to use your time productively. That is, I think, also important to do. I consider getting stuff done part of self-care as well these days. I know they say you're supposed to slow down, but sometimes the best way to go is just to power through and get it done and give yourself the carrot, as my boss always says lately. So a whole bunch of folks are just jumping in, and thank you for joining us this morning. We're just doing our quick mindfulness moment in the chat if you'd like to share out what you did during spring break. I'll continue to enjoy reading those as we go along. Let me go ahead and introduce our speakers. So this morning, like I said, we're going to hear from Nate Davis, and he has worked at Prevent Child Abuse Utah for nearly 4 years as both an education specialist and a parents and teacher supervisor. He graduated from Weber State University with a degree in social work and has been actively involved in the field for over a decade. He cares deeply about the community of which he's a part and appreciates the various opportunities he's had to support families and children. He's also very interested in art and philosophy and how they can help his clients find meaning and joy in their lives. After Nate, oops, wrong slide, this is the multiple screen trick. There we go. After Nate, we'll be hearing from Michelle and Cathy. Michelle is the Project Aware Grant Manager at the Utah State Board of Education, and that grant focuses on suicide prevention and mental health resources for K through 12 schools. Previously, she had worked as a project facilitator at the University Neuropsychiatric Institute and University of Utah Hospitals and Clinics, overseeing the development and implementation of the Safe UT app. While working on her MHA/MBA at Weber State University, Michelle coordinated the merger of the mental health resources and development of Utah statewide crisis line and a three-digit text line. Ooh, all the words. Michelle graduated from Weber State University with a Master's of Health and a Master's of Business Administration in 2019. And with Michelle will be Cathy. And Cathy taught ecology, biology, and health sciences for over 18 years. For 7 of those years, Cathy taught the Success School, which was at-risk students. She's a small business owner and a graduate of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program. Cathy has training in eating disorders, grief counseling, trauma-informed care, and is certified with the American Association for Suicidology as a school suicide prevention specialist. And she is currently the school suicide prevention specialist for the State Board of Education. So with that, let me switch PowerPoints so that I can share Nate's slides real quick for us. All right. Let's see if the multiple screens played nice today. Nate, are you seeing your slides? Awesome. All right, I will mute myself and you are good to go.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Again, my name is Nathan Davis, and I'm an education specialist for Prevent Child Abuse Utah. So just to give you a little idea of what we're typically doing at our agency, on most days, we're going into classrooms and giving presentations classroom by classroom on how to recognize and prevent child abuse, right? So we're teaching to kids. We also do teach school faculty and adults working with youth. So I hope this will be an interesting presentation for you guys. If you have any questions, enter them in the chat. I'd be happy to answer them for you, okay? All right. So this particular presentation will focus on child sex trafficking, okay? So human labor trafficking is also a big problem in this country and around the world, really, right? But for this presentation, we're gonna focus on child sex trafficking and the role as that you, as an educator or adult working with youth, play in keeping our schools and communities safe, okay? This topic has garnered a lot of attention recently, and we thank you for your participation in this webinar. Okay. Next slide, thank you. All right, so course outline. So this is a breakdown of the course outline for today. If you ever want to know where we are in the presentation, just follow the moving agenda, those small circles in the corner of the page, okay? All right, next slide, please. Okay, so just to get started, I'm gonna ask you guys a little poll question here, okay? Go ahead and just pop your answer in the chat for me. So our first poll question is true or false? Child sex trafficking is usually perpetrated by strangers to the child. What do you guys think? True or false? I'll read it again. Child sex trafficking is usually perpetrated by strangers to the child. All right, seeing lots of false here. Good job, folks. If you had this presentation before, you're exactly right. I didn't see a single true. That is true, okay? That's also the case for child sexual abuse in general, okay? So 9 out of 10 times that a child is being sexually abused or trafficked, it's by someone the child knows and trusts, okay? So we teach kids all the time about stranger danger. That's still important for kids to understand, right? Kids shouldn't be talking to people they don't know or giving out information online, those kinds of things, right? But the sad truth is most of the time that a child's being abused, it's by someone they know and trust, okay? So it's important to keep that in mind as we discuss this topic. Okay, next slide, please. So as I mentioned, today we'll be focusing on sex trafficking of children as opposed to labor trafficking. So it's helpful to think of sexual abuse as like an umbrella term, with child sexual trafficking as a subcategory of child sexual abuse, okay? So any form of child sex trafficking is automatically a form of child sexual abuse, okay? So human sex trafficking is defined as, quote, the use of force, fraud, or coercion to compel a person into a commercial sex act. In the case of child sex trafficking, no force, fraud, or coercion is required, since any sex act with a child is considered coercive and criminal by default, since children cannot consent to sexual activity of any kind in any circumstance, okay? That does make child sex trafficking unique, right? There doesn't have to be those force, fraud, coercion. Those components aren't required for it to be a crime, okay? Certain populations are especially at risk of being targeted by perpetrators or traffickers, okay? A few of these risks include having an unstable living situation, having a history of domestic violence in the home, have a caregiver or family member who has a substance abuse issue, if the child is a runaway or involved in the juvenile justice or foster care system, that's a big one, okay, has a history of physical and or sexual abuse or neglect, okay? So again, all of those increase the likelihood of a child being targeted by a trafficker, okay? So traffickers are looking for kids with an unstable situation, right? Looking for kids that they can exploit without too many people noticing, as awful as that sounds, right? And unfortunately, oftentimes that means kids that are in the juvenile justice system or in foster care or runaways, right? Those are prime targets for traffickers. So in what ways specifically does child sex trafficking differ from child sexual abuse? So child sexual abuse is often opportunistic. And by that, I mean a perpetrator may target a child for particular reasons. For example, the child or teen may have low self-esteem, lack of support system, or lack age-appropriate knowledge about human anatomy and sexuality. In these cases, the relationship is usually kept very secret. In child sex trafficking situations, multiple adults have knowledge of the abuse and are facilitating it for financial or other personal gain, okay? It's precisely because multiple adult traffickers are usually close to their victims that such victims are especially unlikely to recognize the trafficking as abnormal, right? So in normal cases of child sexual abuse, the relationship is kept extremely secret, right? Whereas if you have multiple adults facilitating the abuse, right? It could be parents, could be grandparents. It makes it very difficult for that child to understand that what's happening is problematic or abnormal, right? So yeah, it is a little bit different in those respects. So let's take a look at an example of what child sex trafficking might look like. This is just one example, okay? A 16-year-old girl in foster care meets a stylish woman in her late 20s who claims to be a modeling agent. The woman likes and comments on several of her social media posts, showering her with compliments. After several months of grooming, the teen is convinced to run away from her foster home in order to interview for a position at this agency. The teen is sexually trafficked and abused under the false pretense that fame and success are just around the corner. The traffickers also discourage the teen from returning home or obtaining help through threats of harm. Okay, so one example of how child sex trafficking might manifest. Second example here. An 8-year-old boy is told by his mother that he needs to perform sexual acts for their landlord, or they'll be evicted and forced to live on the streets. The young boy, out of guilt and fear for his family, performed sex acts for the landlord. The boy believes he willingly participated in the sexual abuse and that he and his family will be criminally charged if he tries to obtain help, okay? And that's something we see across the board with child sexual abuse, right? Is blaming the child and trying to convince them that they participated and that if they tell, they're going to get in trouble too. And unfortunately, kids lack knowledge about the law, right? They don't understand that they've done nothing wrong. And unfortunately, very, very often, these tactics work. The kids really are afraid that if they say something, they're going to get in trouble, okay? So, and we'll go over this more in just a little bit when we go over disclosures, but this is why if a child does disclose to you that they're being abused or trafficked, it's so important to believe them and tell them they did the right thing by disclosing, right? It takes a lot of courage to disclose this kind of thing. And keep in mind that almost always they really do believe that it was their fault, okay? Okay, so let's talk about these images on the screen. We see a little girl with her mouth being covered up, right? A little girl in chains, right? So these are images that are frequently associated with child sex trafficking. What do you think they suggest about human trafficking and how it happens? Go ahead and just pop your answers in the chat. What are these, when you see these images, what do they tell you about, what message do they send about child sex trafficking? What do you guys think? Violence and money, absolutely. Very good. Okay. What else? Manipulation and fear, very good. Okay. Control, very, very good. Okay. So I think it's important to take a look at some prevalent myths about child sex trafficking. Okay. So we've all seen movies like Taken, for example, right? I don't know if you guys have seen that movie or not. Oh, what's his name? Liam Nielsen? Am I saying that right? Anyways, he's the star of that movie. But unfortunately, that kind of gives us an inaccurate idea of what child sex trafficking really entails. Okay, so here's the first myth we're going to talk about today: that victims of child sex trafficking are usually abducted. That's a myth. Okay, in most cases, child sex trafficking is not a violent crime like you see portrayed in Hollywood. In particular, that movie Taken, right? Usually, victims are groomed, again, groomed into sex trafficking and then forced into secrecy through the use of addiction, violence, or the threat of violence against the child or their families. Okay. So again, it typically does not involve abductions. Typically, the perpetrator or the trafficker uses other means to convince the child to participate. Okay. Myth number 2. Perpetrators of child sex trafficking are usually strangers to the victim. We discussed this one, right? So over half of child sex traffickers were actually related to the victim. So like a direct family member, okay? That means it's very possibly mom, dad, uncle, or grandma who is facilitating the trafficking, which can make it hard for that kid to understand that what's happening is a problem, right? Very good. Myth number 3. Victims are normally physically restrained or locked up. Again, that is a myth. So victims of child sex trafficking stay in these situations for more complicated reasons than being physically restrained or tied up. Okay. Often they lack basic human necessities or are being manipulated and coerced by others. Victims may also lack knowledge of the criminal justice system and fear prosecution from the law if they report. Okay. I've heard examples of traffickers telling their victims that if they report, they'll be arrested for child prostitution, right? And unfortunately, it works. It gets these kids to stay silent. Okay. So, okay. Myth number 4. Child sex trafficking usually involves the transportation of goods across borders. Okay. So moving things across borders is actually called smuggling. Trafficking doesn't require any movement at all. You can be trafficked in your own city, school, or home. Okay, so it usually happens in one's own community. Myth number 5. Child sex trafficking only happens in foreign countries. Big myth here, right? So again, human trafficking can happen anywhere, including your own community. And it is happening in our community, unfortunately. Okay. When we treat it as a problem that happens overseas or over there, we kind of otherize it and stigmatize it, and it prevents us from taking it as seriously as we should in our own communities, right? Okay, number 6. This is a really important one. The last myth we're going to talk about, okay? The only way to reduce child sex trafficking is to arrest all the perpetrators, okay? So law enforcement is an important partner in the work, but arrests alone will not solve this problem, right? We need to consider what is putting these kids in vulnerable situations in the first place, right? Why are they being targeted in the first place? So building and supporting strong families and communities will help prevent child sex trafficking before it happens, right? So we need to adopt a holistic view. Yes, law enforcement, the criminal justice system is an important component in preventing this problem. But we also need to address the root cause: poverty, poor, unstable home life, all the things we've mentioned, right? Things that put kids at risk. Perfect. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, another poll for you guys, okay? This is a little quiz for what we just talked about, okay? True or false? The most important part of child sex trafficking prevention is arresting the perpetrators. False, right? Very good, very good. And on this note too, one problem with this approach of just thinking we have to arrest all the perpetrators, it's kind of a way of washing our own hands of responsibility, right? The truth is we all have an obligation to help our communities be strong, to help families be strong, right? And that might involve efforts on our part as individuals, right? So again, law enforcement is a key part, but we all have a responsibility here, okay? Great. Next slide, please. Okay, so signs of child sex trafficking. So the following patterns of behavior could indicate that a child, teen, or young adult is being sexually trafficked, okay? As discussed previously, trafficking is rarely as dramatic as Hollywood depicts it. Traffickers groom their victims, often from vulnerable populations, by filling particular needs, then isolate and threaten them in order to maintain control. Myths about human trafficking stand in the way of helping victims get the help they need. So youth and young adults experiencing homelessness often remain invisible as they live on the streets, in shelters, in their car, or by staying temporarily with others. Homeless young people have already been failed by numerous systems and people who were supposed to help keep them safe. They are in survival mode, lacking the basic necessities of life. For example, a safe place to live, regular sources of food, etc. Okay, so it's when kids are lacking these basic necessities that traffickers swoop in and take advantage of that situation. Okay. With that said, it's important to note that just because a child displays one of the following signs, that does not mean the child is necessarily being trafficked. But if multiple signs are evident, consider making a report, okay? And we'll go over that in detail in just a little bit. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we're gonna go over some terms that are kind of used in the human trafficking culture, okay, or the child sex trafficking culture. So various terms are often adopted by victims within the child trafficking subculture. Keeping our eyes and ears open can alert us to potential red flags and might warrant making a report, okay? So let's take a look at a few of these, okay? So we have daddy, mama, or manager. These are terms that a trafficker may require their victims to call them. For example, daddy looks after his girls, okay? In that case, daddy is a term used to refer to the trafficker, okay? The game or the life. So this refers to the subculture of sex trafficking rules, power dynamics, etc. So for example, he or she doesn't understand the game yet when talking about a new recruit. The game or the life could be used, those terms, okay? Track or blade. This refers to an area of town known for prostitution activity, such as strip clubs, massage parlors, etc. Quota refers to a set amount of money that victims must make each night before returning home, okay? And by home, of course, we mean whatever, that could mean many different things, right? Branding, a tattoo or carving on a victim that indicates ownership by a trafficker. Victims may not talk about branding, but you may notice the tattoo or brand yourself, okay? Very good. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a very important slide. We're gonna go over the grooming process, okay? So children are often groomed by sex traffickers through a process that begins with healthy or benign behaviors that become increasingly harmful over time. So to provide some context, I'm gonna discuss a real world case that happened in Utah, okay? It took place in West Valley, actually, so close to home, right? So in 2014, Victor Manuel Rex was charged with 34 felonies involving human trafficking, distributing a counterfeit substance, child endangerment, and unlawful sexual activity with a minor. Rex was charged with trafficking teen boys, mainly undocumented Latinos, for sexual purposes, and then using fear to force them into sex and drug trafficking. According to the amended probable cause statement filed in the 3rd District Court, Rex would, quote, use proceeds from his criminal enterprise to form a money, gifts, controlled substances, and food as a way to groom the children to remain and or return to Rex, and eventually became a mechanism of control to overcome the will of the children in order to commit sexual offenses upon them. So this man actually committed suicide while in custody, okay? In this particular case, Rex targeted an especially vulnerable population, undocumented children and adolescents. We can clearly see in this particular case how healthy or benign behaviors, so offering food or money to vulnerable teens and their families, quickly evolved into boundary violations, offering alcohol and drugs, grooming behaviors like isolating the kids, and eventually sexual abuse. Okay. Rex also threatened his victims in various ways in order to prevent them from reporting. So this case really illustrates how the grooming cycle begins with behaviors that might be considered generous or even helpful to the child or their family, but then become increasingly aggressive or harmful. Okay. Often, in cases of child sex trafficking and child sexual abuse in general, perpetrators may try to shame or guilt victims by reminding them of their willingness to cross previous boundaries. For example, using illicit substances. Perpetrators may go to great lengths to ensure that their victims experience some degree of arousal during the assault, which can be pleasurable, and then use this fact in order to convince the child that they participated or were complicit in the sexual abuse in some way. Okay. The child is then isolated from family and loved ones and threatened in various ways to ensure the child's silence. Okay. So again, it's all about guilt, fear, manipulation. These are tactics that traffickers always employ to silence a child. Okay. And I think it's important here too, I just mentioned this, right? Perpetrators may go to great lengths to ensure their victims experience arousal, right? The truth is, when those parts of the body are touched, we experience arousal. It's an automatic response of the body, right? And if kids don't understand that, they can interpret that arousal as evidence of being complicit in the abuse, which is just so not true, right? So again, if we ever receive a disclosure of abuse or trafficking, remind the child that it is not their fault that it happened, even if it feels that way, because it very well might. Okay.
Nate, we had a comment in the chat. Is this a
Yeah.
good time to jump in?
Oh yeah, sorry, of course.
No worries. I know you have one screen, so it's always a challenge.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So
I had a student call everyone daddy, had ideations like she was being trafficked. Okay. We called DCFS, but nothing happened. Who are we supposed to contact if we suspect trafficking? DCFS. Yes, that is who you would call. Okay. Because remember, child sex trafficking is really just a subtype of child sexual abuse. Okay. You could also report to the police. That's true. But yes, I would definitely call DCFS. Okay. Even if you're not sure, you just kind of speculate. It's better to call DCFS than to not call, right? They ask certain important questions, and they're qualified to kind of investigate further and see if this is actually a case of trafficking. Okay. Great question, though. Yes, it is DCFS. Wonderful. Okay. Thanks for hanging in there, guys. We're moving along. So we're going to change gears here just a little bit and talk about online safety. Okay. Because unfortunately, as the internet has kind of revolutionized our world, it's also created more opportunities for perpetrators to target kids. Okay. So just a few stats here I want to go over. Next slide, please. Amanda, thank you. So 63 to 75% of victimized children have been advertised online. Okay. Again, a big change from 30 years ago to how this whole business operates. Okay. Online advertising has increased and street advertising has decreased. Okay. So it's become somewhat more underground, right? It's more subtle in certain respects. Okay. A majority of older teen victims wrote the ads and communicated with buyers themselves. Okay. Again, this is because of that manipulation and coercion, right? And because it can be the teen who is writing the ads, communicating with buyers, that's even more reason for them to feel like it's their fault that is happening, right? That they're participating, that they're complicit, even though that's of course false, okay? A majority of older teen victims, oh, sorry, I just read that one here. Let's see. Most traffickers meet their victims in person, not online, which is interesting. Okay. I was kind of surprised by that stat. I would have thought it would mostly be online nowadays, but it's still in person. Okay. Great. Next slide, please. Okay, privacy. So it's especially important for children to understand how to utilize the privacy settings on the various devices and apps that they use. Location services like GPS tracking should be turned off, and identifying information like the child's full name, school, or places frequented should be kept hidden to the general public. Minors should also be careful not to accept friend requests from strangers or enter into secret relationships online, perhaps with someone posing as an older teen. Okay. And one thing that I've noticed just working with foster kids and different populations is that they crave that attention. They crave that affection, right? And if an older teen or an older person compliments them, says they're beautiful, they're funny, they have all of this untapped talent, that's almost irresistible, right? So the key is to prevent these people from interacting with these teens in the first place, right? And the key to that is understanding how to use these privacy settings, okay? Great. Next slide, please. So these are popular mainstream sites that are used for grooming, okay? We're familiar with a lot of these, right? Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, okay, Tinder. Some keywords to look out for: young, fresh, sweet, virgin, petite, teen, tight, or new, okay? If we see these buzzwords popping up on social media in the kids that we work with, okay, that could definitely be a red flag. So again, kids use social media constantly, right? It's just, and there are positives and negatives to that for all sorts of reasons, right? But if we see these red flags, when the kids that we work with are using social media, that we want to follow up, make a report. Okay. Great. Next slide, please. So technology can also help, right? We talk a lot about how technology has made this, problem much worse, how it's, provided more opportunities for perpetrators to target kids, but it can also be helpful, okay? Young people have more access to sex education online, right? Kids have become more savvy online, right? Most kids do understand many of the basics about keeping themselves safe online. I've seen this firsthand when teaching in classrooms, okay? Oftentimes they know more than I do about how to use these various apps, unfortunately, right? So many times these young people are the experts on these apps, okay? Helpline and other survivor groups can be connected online, right? So one positive part about this is sometimes kids are just embarrassed to report, or they're terrified to report, right? There are helplines out there, for example, like the Safe Utah app, right, where they can talk to someone anonymously, right, and get help, advice anonymously. It makes it less scary, less embarrassing, okay? Survivor groups on social media or other outlets can help heal, right, provide support, and it can also be a way to reach people outside the lifestyle, right? So to spread information, to spread awareness, of just how big of an issue this is in our own community, right? So technology can be a problem, but it can also be helpful, okay? All right, next slide, please. So we call these the ABCDs of disclosures, okay? So the A stands for assure, B believe, C child talks, and D determine needs, okay? So keep in mind, disclosures of trafficking from children are rare, okay? Because the child is often groomed into thinking that what's happening is normal, and because multiple adults are usually participating in the trafficking, often within that child's family, okay? Children may also fear retaliation if they tell someone. They may fear losing their relationship with the trafficker. They may mistake manipulation for love and may depend upon the trafficker for economic support, right? This is especially the case if the trafficker is a parent, right? They don't want to get their parents in trouble. They don't want to go to foster care. It makes it that much more difficult for them to reach out and to get help, okay? Which is really why it's so important for us to be observant and look for the signs and make a disclosure if we see those, or make a report if we see those red flags, okay? As is common with abuse, children may feel guilty as if what happened is their fault. And again, children don't understand the legal or criminal justice system and may fear going to jail or other prosecution should they report, okay? Even so, if you do receive a disclosure, it's important to know how to respond appropriately, okay? Understanding how to report child abuse also helps improve the safety of our communities in general, okay? So, if a child does choose to disclose a case of child sex trafficking to you, this is how you should respond. So, A, assure the child they did the right thing by coming to talk to you, okay? So now is a good time to rehab these conversations with the child. Let them know that they are brave and smart for talking to you and thank them for doing so, okay? This is huge, this next one, okay? Let them know that what happened was not their fault, they are not to blame, and they will not be held responsible by the criminal justice system, okay? Again, super important to convey that information if you receive a report, okay? Also assure them that you will do everything within your power to help them, okay? Now, don't make promises you can't keep, right? Don't say like, everything's gonna be okay. We can't promise that, right? We don't know what's gonna happen once we make that disclosure, right? We wanna preserve that bond of trust. What we can say though, is I promise to do my best to do everything I can to help you, right? I can keep that promise. I can't promise that everything is going to be okay, right? So convey support, promise to help them as much as you can, but don't make promises you can't keep. It hurts that trust, okay? B, believe the child. Very few reports of sexual abuse or trafficking are falsely reported, okay? Sexually abused children who are not believed are at greater risk for psychological, emotional, social, and physical problems, often lasting into adulthood, okay? B, be calm. Expressing shock or panic can frighten a child and make the child shut down or change or retract the story. Keep in mind that children who are sexually abused or trafficked can and do heal. Very important to keep that in mind, okay? Try not to show anger towards the offender who may be someone the child loves, right? Showing anger to that person could actually just add to the child's burden, right? You may feel angry, understandable, right? But in that moment, just convey compassion, support. Don't let that shock or anger be visible, right? It just makes it harder for that child. And then finally, we have D, or sorry, C, child talks, okay? Ask the child open-ended questions. So for example, tell me more about that. What did you mean by that? What happened next, okay? Kids are suggestible. Don't put words in their mouth, okay? And don't use leading questions as this can alter a child's memory. It can also help the child change their answers to fit what you are asking and can make future tellings sound coached, which can be detrimental if the case goes to court. Okay, so again, let the child talk, ask open-ended questions. Okay, and then finally D, determine needs. So the first thing we want to do is determine the child's immediate needs, right? If you see the child being exploited in person, call 911, right? If you need to make a report, it needs to be you who makes it. Okay, it can't be a supervisor, it can't be somebody else. You can have that person on the call with you if you want for like moral support, right? But if you receive the disclosure, it needs to be you who makes the report. DCFS does not want hearsay. Okay. Seek the help of a professional who is trained to interview the child about sexual abuse and child sex trafficking. Professional guidance can be critical to the child's healing and criminal prosecution of the trafficker. Okay. Again, call DCFS. They have all the skills necessary to evaluate the child's needs and see if they should open a case or not. Okay. So disclosures may turn your world upside down. I'll be honest about that. Okay. But remember, the child's safety is always your first priority. Okay. Wonderful. Next slide, please. Okay, so reporting. Every adult in the state of Utah is a mandated reporter for child sex trafficking and let's start over. Sorry. Every adult in the state of Utah is a mandated reporter for child sex trafficking and child sexual abuse. That means that if you have reason to believe that a child is being sex trafficked, you must report it. If it is later discovered that a given adult had knowledge of child abuse and failed to report, they can actually be charged with a crime. Okay. With that said, there is a good faith clause to this law. Okay. So if we have suspicions of child sexual abuse, we make a call to DCFS. It turns out those suspicions are unfounded. Okay. We can't be held liable for that as long as we make the call in good faith. Okay. So what that means is it's better to call and be wrong than to not call at all. Okay. If you have received a disclosure of abuse that does not involve child sex trafficking, you're going to call the DCFS. Okay. And if it does involve sex trafficking, you want to determine the child's immediate needs. Okay. If they're in immediate danger, call 911. If not, make a call to DCFS. Okay. If you believe you've witnessed human trafficking in person, do not approach the traffickers yourself, as this may place you or the victim in danger, okay, and jeopardize the possibility of future prosecution by the state, okay. Another option is to call the UTIP, the Utah Trafficking In-Person Force tip line, okay. It's that second little circle up there, and tell them your suspicions, okay. Let them know that what you believe you have observed and provide actionable information. Okay, this could be description of cars, descriptions of people, when and where you saw the conduct, or a photo if it's safe to take one. Okay. If you believe you have witnessed human trafficking online, report your suspicions to the ICAC or Internet Crimes Against Children tip line. Okay. Let them know what you believe you have observed and provide actionable information. So for example, usernames, app names, screenshots of direct messages and comments, etc. Okay. Again, if you're not sure what number to call DCFS or the child abuse hotline. Okay. They can direct you to the right place or contact the correct organizations themselves. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, so I had to, next slide, please. So I had to include a shameless promotional slide in here, okay? So PCAU's reason for being is the protection of Utah's children and families, okay? Our education team works with school administrators and counselors across the state to ensure that as many students as possible learn how to recognize, resist, and report child abuse, while our Parents as Teachers program works with at-risk families directly in the home. It's because of generous contributions from the community that PCAU is able to continue this important work. So we don't charge schools or faculty for our presentations. They're totally free. Again, we thank you so much for your time to learn about this important topic. And we hope that together we can provide hope to those without a voice and contribute to the flourishing of our communities. Okay. So thank you so much. Any questions?
Thank you, Nate. Yes, we have a couple minutes here. If you guys have some questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat or come off mute and ask them directly. We've got some good resources here for you on the screen.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Okay. Darkness to light. I love them. We use them all the time. Tons and tons of good information if you're curious. So.
All right, well, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, Nate. So thank you so much for your time this morning. I know it's a heavy topic, but it's always valuable information. And I have had similar presentations before, but it's, I guess surprising is the right word. I always pick up something new. There's always a new little tidbit or a terminology that I wasn't familiar with. So I find that to be helpful. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, well, thank you for facilitating. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right. Have a great day. You're welcome.
Thank you.
And listen with to Michelle and Cathy. Give me just a moment as I switch my screens.
I got to go teach at a school. So I will see you guys later. Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing that. Have a good afternoon.
You too.
All right. And then we'll get, oh, no, I'm going to stop sharing. That's what I'm going to do. It's, you know, we're getting our ducks in a row here. I believe Michelle is going to share the next presentation for us. And let me check my roster. And Cathy Davis is here too. Huzzah. We have both presenters. Happy day. All right.
Perfect. I jumped on at the exact right time.
You did. That was good timing.
Okay, let me share my screen 1 second.
Sure.
Okay, can we see this?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. All right, then I will just kind of jump right in, and Cathy and I are going to kind of split this. So yeah. So before we begin, my name is Michelle Knight. I'm the Project Aware Grant Manager at the Utah State Board of Education. And Cathy, if you can unmute yourself, feel free to introduce yourself.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, you can? Okay. My name's Cathy Davis, and I've presented to you folks before, and I'm the Suicide Prevention Specialist here at USBE.
Excellent. Thank you, Cathy. So before we jump into things, first things first is we always want to talk about how language matters. So by doing so, hold on, let me backtrack. We are presenting on responding to a crisis situation. But with safe messaging and language matters, we want to shy away from things like saying, successful, completed, unsuccessful, failed. When phrases like that are used, it's kind of like a checkbox, like here is another task that was accomplished. And there's also that feeling of disappointment when it's not accomplished. And we want to shy away from that when we start talking about suicides and deaths and people taking their lives. So we're trying to do, it's kind of a nationwide effort to change our verbiage to things like died by suicide, they survived their attempt, and really highlight that first person language. Same thing when we hear the word committed suicide. Committed typically implies that there's been a crime or a sin. They were, committed to a mental hospital, things like that. So again, died by suicide, took their own life. And then one thing we're really stressing at the Utah State Board of Education is using that person first language and showing that someone is more than just their mental health condition. So rather than saying Sally is suicidal or, you know, Johnny has schizophrenia. There's more to Sally and Johnny than their thoughts and their disease. So we're saying more things like, you know, she lives with suicidal thoughts, or, you know, Johnny, instead of he is schizophrenic, he has schizophrenia, or he, you know, things like that. Before we jump into how to respond to a crisis situation, we really want to focus on scaling the level of response. And this is just one example from one of our school districts. Scaling the level of response is based on the individual event that needs to be assessed. And that estimates the overall level of need. So a student who, you know, breaks their leg on the playground is an example of a pretty minimal level response. You know, the school team can kind of handle that one. But if you have, you know, a natural disaster such as, you know, rain causing local flooding and it damages parts of the school, but no one's really injured. Oops. Sorry, these are timed slides and I'm going too slow apparently. That could be something of a school building and maybe even district level response. Another district level response could be a gang fight that includes multiple students. A bus accident could be something that requires a large scale regional response. And then something that includes a community response. That could be someone who, you know, passed away and it really hit the entirety of the school systems and school district. And we really want to pull in as many available resources as we can at that point. So the goals of crisis response are fourfold. So first, we want to facilitate healing of individuals from the grief and distress of loss. We really want to prevent suicide among people who are high at risk after exposure to suicide. We want to mitigate other negative effects of exposure to the crisis. And we really want to restore the learning environment as the overarching goal. So this is just at one LEA. They, in one single school year, they had experienced all of these different crises. And they range from a minimal level response to a regional level response. So you can see that there are a number of issues that happened in this school. Another thing to remember is the circles of vulnerability model. It can be used to determine the degree of emotional impact a death by suicide has on members of the community. Those individuals most at risk after a suicide include those in a geographical, social, and psychological proximity to the individual who died by suicide. And these could be eyewitnesses, victims, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, everyone, current people with current mental disorders or a history of trauma. So we always want to just make sure that we're reaching out to those folks and following up with them. And then we need to recognize the tension and get on the same page. So the goal of the person at risk is to end their suffering. They are seeing suicide as their perceived solution to, you know, their problem. However, the goal of the helper is to keep the person alive and calm their fears. So teachers are pretty well positioned to promote a feeling of connectedness and belonging in their school community. But as any kind of faculty, you have an important role to play in preventing suicide because you're the ones who have the daily contact with most of these young people. And some of them have problems that could result in serious injury or even a death by suicide. So really, you guys are that front line, people in position, oh my gosh, to notice what students say, do, and write when you suspect someone may be at risk of self-harm. So just remembering to always look out for those warning signs. and being prepared to respond. Cathy will go into further details of steps, but we want to identify personal warning signs, self-management strategies, identify some reasons for living, their social supports, and then provide those crisis emergency steps. And this can all be summed up in our learn response. So to help those in crisis, we need to learn, look for warning signs, empathize, ask about suicide, restrict lethal means, and provide that next level of care. We're going to play a quick video and then Cathy will take over.
So what is empathy and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
All right, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. So what are your reaction to that video? I just want to start with getting some feedback from the participants to what could you relate to that video? What resonated with you in your daily life? And can you monitor the chat, Amanda?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, because the last line is all about connection, and our students, they want to connect. They want to connect to others. They want to figure out what's going on with their own world, but you are that bridge for them. So I'm just going to see what feedback you had, and then we'll kind of go from there. And I'll be talking about navigating a crisis with our students and just going through the steps that Michelle outlined. So Amanda, any chats?
Nothing yet, but I'll be vulnerable and share. So
okay, all right.
When I see that, it reminds me not to at least people. I think in an attempt to, share the pain, I at least them, or I share a similar story. So that is a reminder for me often, is that's not what we should do. We just need to sit with them in it and help them. So, but if anybody else has any other comments on the video, please throw them in the chat or come off mute and
all right. And I want this to be interactive. If you have any questions, please feel free to put something in the chat. So this is all about navigating a crisis, and we intentionally use the dark background because what you're going to be doing is putting light into the situation. Lots of times I feel like our kids kind of put themselves in a box. And what we do as educators, as mentors, is we poke holes in the box to let the light in. So some of the things that I like to do in a training is give you the words and give you the script, because it's like, I want to interact with them, but I really don't know how to say this. So you may even want to take this, put it on a 3x5 card, and just start memorizing some sentence starters. Like, it sounds like things haven't been going really well for you lately. Of all those issues and problems you described, which ones would you say you want to change the most? So you always want to direct it back to the student, because the student doesn't realize that they're the agent of change. And another thing too you want to do is validate them. And I can see how you got to that point. It's really, really helpful. Instead of doing the at leasting that Amanda mentioned, if you could change one thing about what's happening to you right now, what would that be? And give them the power, give them the control back. And then finally, what would you like to be different about what's going on right now? And then Amanda, I saw something pop up. Do you want to just read that?
Sure. So there's a mentor that says she always feels like she has to be positive in the end, struggling to know how to bridge empathy and help lighten the burden.
Okay. And that's really, it's hard to find that sweet spot. That's such a really apt comment. Thank you so much for really seeing things as they really are in this situation. So what you're doing is you're providing hope. And it's interesting. We have some kids that are naturally optimistic and other kids that are just naturally pessimistic. So helping them do the reframe is what we can do best. Do you want to go on to the next slide? Okay, before we start this, and you'll have to start this, but before we start this, what I want to do is just give you some helpful tools. When you're dealing with kids, they're going to mirror your response. So if you are upset and anxious, that's going to feed their anxiousness and their anxiety. But if you stay calm, avoid overreacting, express support and concern, and ask how you help, that's what's going to be helpful. So you can have that conversation with kids and say, is this helping or is this hurting? What do you need right now? So this is a great clip from a website that I refer to all the time. It's Now Matters Now. And so I'll have you go ahead and play that, Michelle. And I think you just click somewhere on there. And it takes a minute. Whoops. I thought it was embedded.
It is, and I'm getting this like spinning wheel of trying.
Okay.
1 second.
Okay.
Hello. I'll just post the link for everyone.
Okay, yeah, so I'll just essentially say, so in this video clip, she's telling other people what she needs when she's in crisis. She says, I don't need you to tell me what to do, give me advice. I just need you to sit there and be with me in the crisis. There's a famous research study that said, and this is what researchers do. We do these crazy studies, and we put a bunch of people in and had them immerse themselves in a bucket of like a bathtub full of ice, okay, to see how long they could stay in this bathtub full of ice all by themselves. Well, they couldn't stay in there very long, but if there was someone with them while they are immersed in the bathtub full of ice, they could stay like 20 to 50% longer submerged because they had someone experiencing that with them. So go on to the next slide. So going through the warning signs, it's all about asking clarifying questions, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to unpack what's going on for that student. So you do a series of questions, and it's kind of like an interview where the attention is all on the other person, and you're just going to have them tell you, what are some things that you notice inside of yourself during these situations? Kids in crisis want to get outside of their body. They want to disassociate. They don't want to feel those feelings, but we need them to feel their feelings so that those feelings will pass through. Feelings aren't facts, and lots of times kids think that they are. So you have to help reframe this by saying, like, what are some things that aren't going so well, or indicators? Like, for instance, you might want to ask them, how are you sleeping lately? Just go back to the basics of your activities of daily living. Are they sleeping? Are they eating? Are they doing those things? And if we wanted to prevent this from happening in the future, how might we know when you're headed down this road? So we want our kids to be developing their own spidey sense, if you will, of how things are going on for them, because everybody has a spidey sense and knows when they're just doing too much. Do you want to go on to the next one? Okay. Yeah, just go, we'll go on to the next slide. Oh, is this the next slide? It is the next slide. Or is it? Oh yeah, it is. Oh, no, it's not. Just the next slide. There we go. There we go. Okay, self-management. So there's just something that I learned, and I learned from my son. One time I was just really dysregulated, and he's in the car with me, and he says, "Mom, halt." And I go, "What's halt?" He says, "Halt. I just learned that in treatment. It means, are you hungry, angry, lonely, or tired?" And sometimes that's just good to do with your kids. Like, just go back to the basics. Are they hungry? Are they angry? Are they lonely? Are they tired? So HALT is just the abbreviation for that. So when feeling upset or stressed, what are some things that help you calm down or feel less stressed? So what you see we're doing at this point is we're skill building. And some things that are really easy to do for a mentor would be like some breathing exercises, like some paced breathing, or I even, and you can't see my, I don't think you can see me on the screen, can you? Probably can't, but anyway.
It's a tiny box.
It's a tiny box. Okay, so anyway, if you can see my hand held up, can you see my hand held up? Okay, so what I do with kids is I just have them hold their hand up with 5, and then I go inhale as they trace their thumb, exhale, then inhale to the index, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, and just do that. That's something, and I've done this with high school kids. I've done this with adults. Okay. Oh, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. HALT. So what are some things you use to find helpful when stressed, even you don't do them anymore? A lot of things that I did when I was teaching school success, and this was an alternative program housed within the regular ed of Murray High School. I used to have coping boxes for my kids, and we would make them for themselves. So this is something that you could easily do with your students as mentors. Have them build a box, so when they're stressed, they can do that, and have it activate the senses. Like if there's something like a perfume that they love to smell, or if there's like a candle that they could light, or if there's a playlist on their iPhone that they can, and I've had students make playlists like, okay, when you are stressed, what calms you down? If music is something that helps them and it helps regulate themselves, then get a playlist going. And even if you haven't done this anymore, it's just something you need to do. And then go ahead and go on to the next slide. Okay. We're still stuck on, okay, well, we're on that slide. If you could go back to that slide, sorry, it took you so long to, there we go. So what I say self-management is it's the answer to this question. What is saving my life right now? Okay. I'm currently in a doctoral program, so I'm getting my doctorate. I have a really stressful job. I just bought a house and I'm building a house. Do you think I can have anything more on my plate? But what's saving my life right now is I have this little Vaseline jar that's teeny tiny, and it makes me happy every time I put Vaseline on. It's a teeny, teeny, tiny Vaseline jar. And just to look at it makes me super, super happy. That's literally saving my life right now, because it's the little things. It's listening to things on the radio. It's seeing my favorite friends, seeing Amanda's smiling face and Michelle. Those are the things that are saving my life right now. So what is saving your life right now? What is something that you can't live without? Is it that teeny tiny, you can get these at Walmart. They're so fun. Also, I went to Swig and they gave me a bendy straw. Do you know how happy that made me feel? The bendy straw, oh my gosh, it's frozen gummy worms. I love that. And see, sometimes just talking to them about those kinds of things gets them outside of themselves, because they need to get out of their own way. So let's go on to the next one. Grandkids, seeing blossoms and flowers outside. Oh, I know it. Good weather. I love this. All right. So social support is the next thing. If the student cannot identify a social support, provide some general suggestions. Ultimately, you may have some students that have no social support whatsoever. You may be their lifeline. You may be their social support. And I don't want you to feel that. I want you to feel that to be an honor, that they are trusting you and they're looking up to you. So when feeling upset or stressed, who helps to take your mind off things or cheer you up? And who do you know who provides you with support during tough times? I have kids get out a 3x5 card and say, who are those people that you call? Who's your person? So people often have a family member, a friend, or coworker who supports them in times of need. And who would that person be in your life? One thing I want to say about social support is sometimes our kids are attracted to toxic people, and they need help identifying who is toxic and who is healthy. So sometimes we have to go down that lane to say, now, you spend a lot of time with that person. How does that person make you feel after you've spent time with them? So really keep in mind that you are a positive person for them, and they will have positive interactions with you, and that will make them feel better. And then you have to say, well, when you're with somebody that just kind of sucks you dry, they're toxic for you, how does that make you feel? So what can you do in your choice of friends? And a lot of that is creating boundaries. And sometimes our kids don't know how to create boundaries. And that's something that they also can be taught as a skill. So looking for supports, know that you can't diminish your role. You are very vital people in their lives, and you may be their primary support. All right, we're going to go to do some tough stuff on the next slide. And here's the thing, it's really, I'm going to hold your hand and help you feel comfortable with being uncomfortable. You know what, I say this all the time. Like one time I had a student that said, Miss D, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm just a little bit pregnant. And after she said that, I just about bust up laughing, but I realized that she had no idea what was really going on for her in her life and what that was going to mean. And so I just met her where she was. So that's what I tell people first and foremost, meet that person where they are, not where you want them to be. Don't give them advice, but ask them. So here's some ways that you can ask the question. And the A stands for ask about suicide. But we want you to ask in a way that invites an honest response. Use any signs you've noticed as part of the ask. So be direct and use the word suicide and be prepared to hear a yes. And if you hear a yes, try and stay calm and realize that asking about suicide is not going to put the idea in someone's head. So here are some examples of ways to ask someone about suicide. So with all the stress and painful emotions you're describing to me, it would be understandable if you had thoughts of ending your life. Have you had any thoughts like that? Here's another way, in the purple. Or sometimes people in your situation feel like they don't want to live anymore, or sometimes they think about killing themselves. So with these two statements, you're telling kids that you're not the only one that's had suicidal thoughts. You're not the only one. And kids always need to know that they're not alone, that other people have thoughts like these. And then the final one is, you said that you're feeling like you can't handle it anymore. When you say that, do you mean you're thinking about suicide? So these are just 3 ways that and a lot of us got together and we just drafted these, and this is kind of a more conversational tone for that. You can just come right out and ask about suicide as well. But this is kind of a way to kind of ease into it. So of these 3, do any of these 3 statements sound like your voice? Or is there something that you might add to kind of help the situation? And know that the law will support you. You are allowed as an employee to ask about suicide. All right, so if the answer is yes, now what? So that's the next slide. So there's a lot of things available for kids, and I started my job back in 2014 before Safe UT was available, and Safe UT is such a great tool for all of us. If you don't have this loaded on your phone, please download it. And so that you have it, it's just in the App Store under Safe UT. And what I tell folks all the time is, if you have a student that's suicidal and they need help right away, you can call the crisis line with them right there. And because you know, if parents aren't available, or the next best thing is to call the crisis line. So when feeling upset or stressed, who helps to take your mind off of things or cheer you up? And who do you know who provides you with support during tough times? People often have a family member, friend, or coworker who supports them in times of need. Who would that person be in your life? So this is where you're getting a list of some folks that they can turn to in a situation. Because you see, when kids seem to somehow separate their mental health from their physical health, they're comfortable with seeking help for their physical health. Like they'll go to a doctor if they need, if they have a cold or something like that, or if they break a leg. But if they have mental needs, they're not as likely to go and seek them out. But your mental health and your physical health, they are linked. So go ahead and go on to the next one. This is a pamphlet that we put together. I believe Amanda probably helped me with this. And I worked on this with Michelle, and this is on our website, and it would be really helpful if you could download this. We have it in English. We also have it in Spanish. So that's just something that you can hand out or you can use. And then, and that goes through the warning signs and all of that. I want to end with this video.
Mr. Bergstrom! Hey, Mr. Bergstrom!
Hey, Lisa!
Hey, Lisa, indeed!
What? What is it?
Well, I mean, were you just gonna leave just like that?
Oh, I'm sorry, Lisa. You know, it's the life of of the substitute teacher. He's a fraud. Today he might be wearing gym shorts. Tomorrow he's speaking French or pretending to know how to run a bandsaw or God knows what.
You can't go. You're the best teacher I'll ever have.
Oh, that's not true. Other teachers will come along.
Oh, please.
No, I can't lie to you. I am the best. But, you know, they need me over in the projects of Capital City.
But I need you too.
That's the problem with being middle class. Anybody who really cares will abandon you for those who need it more.
I understand. Mr. Bergstrom, I'm gonna miss you.
Well, I'll tell you what. Whenever you feel like you're alone and there's nobody you can rely on, this is all you need to know.
Thank you, Mr. Bergstrom.
All aboard.
So, I guess this is it. If you don't mind, I'll just run alongside the train as it speeds you from my life.
Goodbye, Lisa, honey. It'll be okay. Just read the note.
Okay. Well, I want to just pause for a moment. The reason I wanted to show that video to you is, and I'm going to read you the lines of a poem. This is the lyrics of a song that I listen to when I'm really having a bad day. And I'm just going to read the first two stanzas of this poem. It says, "You've owned your fear in all your self-loathing. You've owned the voices inside of your head. You've owned the shame and reproach of your failure. It's time to own your belovedness. You've owned your past and how it's defined you. You've owned everything everybody else says. It's time to hear what your father," and it's a little religious poem, "has spoken. It's time to own your belovedness." So basically, by that teacher giving Lisa the note, "You are Lisa Simpson," you are helping them find their belovedness amongst all the self-loathing. Does that make sense? Because at the root of it all is we have to help our students accept themselves. And I want to use the term belovedness because I know you guys get to have that type of contact with your kids. Oh, I will send you guys a printed copy of that. Because you know what? I learn more about myself working with my students than any other time. And you've got to help your students realize that a crisis is temporary. It doesn't last unless we prolong it. And so the way that we can work with our kids is by letting them know that we have their back, and also getting them a sense that they are really precious and that they matter. And there we go. Okay. So do you have any questions? And we'll get Michelle off mute and we can answer your questions. Oh, there's one more slide. I'm so sorry. Let me just go ahead and there's just this one slide, and I don't want to go over time, but let me go talk to you about postvention and the last three resources. So
so you know, you guys are doing great. We have like a half an hour, so no stress.
Oh, good. We didn't know time wise. So when we talk about postvention, and let me just talk to you about, so I had to do this presentation with Michelle, and I'm a broken record when I introduce ourselves. I say I'm old school and Michelle is new cool, but she is the new cool. That's why she's running the technology and I'm not. And I take Michelle out on a lot of my crises, and we have to have each other's back, and we have to be there for one another to just talk through situations, because you never worry alone. I don't want you folks losing sleep. If you've got a situation and you need to contact us, feel free to do so, because a crisis team has that mantra of never worry alone. And what we're focusing on is properly handling interactions with the family, communicating with the community, using safe messaging, not saying committed suicide, using the things that are safe, because we want to avoid suicide contagion. I'm going to read a quote from the After a Suicide Toolkit because I really love what it says. It says, the suicide of a student can leave a school faced with grieving students, distressed parents and school staff, media attention, and a community struggling to understand what happened and why. In this situation, schools need reliable information, practical tools, and pragmatic guidance to help them protect their students, to communicate with the public, and to return to their primary mission of educating students. So we want to restore that learning environment and prevent further suicides. So we're going to put our contact information up on the next slide. And Michelle, do they know that you're bringing a wonderful one? Do they know that you won't be available for 3 months? Because we've got a great announcement. Do you want to announce that?
Sure, I'm heading out on maternity leave, but I don't think they knew that.
Oh, well, I get so excited. I'm old school and I'm just like so proud of Michelle. And I just love Michelle so much that I can't, she's going to have, do you want to tell them what you're having?
Sure, a beautiful baby girl, and probably any minute now.
Oh my gosh.
Are you in labor?
Almost, yeah, like starting.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. You guys got it. You got this presentation just in the nick of time.
Yeah.
So, and then there's one more slide.
Resources.
And these are additional resources for you. And we've got, oops, it just can, yeah, it'll come back up in a sec. So first and foremost, if you haven't downloaded the Safe UT app, make sure you do that. The Utah Suicide Prevention Coalition, it's actually with the Live On Utah campaign, Utah State Board of Education, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. In July, it's going to go from this number to 988. And so we'll be doing a lot of training around that. In Spanish, that's the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Oh, look, congratulations, Michelle. Everyone's so excited for you. Can I just say that if she can wait to her due date is May 4th. May the 4th be with you. Big Star Wars fan. The Trevor Project for our folks that identify as LGBTQ, National Sexual Assault Hotline. So there's a lot of resources out there for our folks.
Well, thank you for all that. We do have ample time if anybody has specific questions. Oh, there's something in the chat. Can you see?
Good. If you could read it, I can just see the first part. If a youth says they want to die or kill themselves, and then I can't see the rest.
Okay, so if a youth says they want to die or kill themselves and they excuse me, and they are a close personal contact, is it appropriate to go directly to uni, or is there a better place?
I don't know, Michelle, did you want to answer that, or what would you say? Would you say calling the mobile crisis outreach team first? That's what I would say. Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
So I would recommend calling the MCOT teams, and that can be done through that lifeline number. A mobile crisis outreach team can come anywhere in the state to you. They're clinicians, but they come as plainclothes people. So there's no, bells and whistles and sirens and everything that show up. But then they can kind of de-escalate the situation and talk to the youth or family or whoever needs to at their own place. So whether that's at home, place of work, in school, wherever. And if it escalates and if they need to be sheeted and brought to uni, then they can do that as well. They can escort directly to, HMHI, the new name for uni. But I would always recommend MCOT first, and there is no cost. That is free to anyone in the state. And so
And-
you can just call that same Lifeline number or that soon to be 988 number and just request that an MCOT team comes out to you. And as I mentioned, that is across the entire state.
And I'm just gonna add a few things because although Michelle and I are super seasoned with what we've been doing, and we've been doing this for a long time and been on lots of different scenes, there's many times when I call the MCOT team to meet me there at the school, because when Michelle was talking about scaling a crisis, when I find out a little bit more about the young person that died by suicide, if they were really well connected, I'm going to need a lot of support. I'm just going to tell you a quick story. So, Michelle, was it about 2 years ago that we dealt with the hockey player at Brighton? Was it about 2 years ago? And
Yeah.
it was, yeah. So do they take a while to get to the location? Actually, it all depends. They're pretty, it hasn't taken me longer than maybe 10, 15 minutes usually. But going back to the hockey player situation. So this hockey player was very well connected. And so what we did is, after we did the initial response, we went and moved our response to the hockey team itself, and then dealt with the hockey team and also dealt with the parents. So we had Michelle there, we had Safe UT there, we had the crisis team there, we had the district's crisis team available. So we scaled that response as we were responding. Oh, there we go. Direct link to MCOT. Thank you so much, Amanda, for putting that in there. And the mobile crisis outreach team is the thing is I think each and every one of us have been in a crisis in our lives, and we each have a different response to what is going to help us through our meltdowns. I was out in Tooele, and they have a way of calling a crisis a come apart. So when they're having a come apart, what do you do to put yourself back together again? So when I did the training out in Tooele, we got these little Lego figures that came apart, and then we had everybody put their Lego figure back together to go ahead and get back with the program. So what's saving your life might be just carrying your little Vaseline with you as you are going through the thing, and you need some margins. And this is so cute. It's just, I tell you, I just have to look at it. It makes me so happy. So, oh, look at what's saving her life is aromatherapy, stress relief, eucalyptus and tea. I love that.
Oh yeah, that's my constantly burning candle. And for those who aren't looking at the chat, I just responded to Kim. Typically when you call, they will give you a dispatch time frame, so you'll know exactly how long it'll take. Most of our local mental health authorities across the state have numerous amounts of teams, anywhere from 2 to 3 on call to 6 or 7, and even more in like the more populated areas. So if everyone is absolutely dispatched at that exact moment, it may take longer, but typically, like Cathy said, it should be just a quick turnaround, 15 minutes or so. If they do have to, cross the entire county, it might be a little bit longer.
Okay, Michelle, there's a really good question in the chat about students that are undocumented. How can you make sure that the MCOT team is not going to report them, correct?
No.
Yeah, that's not. But I think that, and do they have members of the crisis team that speak Spanish?
Yes.
Okay, so that's another important thing too, that we'll meet the student where they are and speak to them in their language so that they understand. Yeah, because it's
and not just Spanish. They have a wide variety of languages available, and then if they don't, they're really good at getting translation services available for them as well.
So on the note of helping kind of quell the fears, could you talk to them about it being a free public resource, or is there any information that has to be given before services?
Oh, no, it's a free public service. Absolutely. Same with Safe UT. It's totally confidential as well. So no information is going to be shared at that point about their status or anything like that. So absolutely, I would definitely let them know, like, this is free. No one's gonna, call ICE or anything on you. We just want to help.
It's essentially mental health first aid. And that's actually the name of a training that we do, that's really, really helpful too, because really essentially what you're doing is you're calming their fears, and you're kind of helping them navigate that storm. So basically, when people are in crisis, they feel like they're in this boat in the middle of the ocean and there's just waves crashing around them. What you're doing is you're getting someone in the boat with them to ride those waves, because the waves will die down. But someone that's trained in crisis response has those skills to help ease the fears and help as the waves die down, because the waves will die down. It might take a while. And if they're having a panic attack, they may have to just say, you're having a panic attack, and just call it for what it is and say that panic attacks end, but I'm going to stay with you. Another thing too that I didn't mention is when you're with kids in crisis, if they've been traumatized, if they have a heavy trauma history, always ask them before you touch them or put your arm around them. Don't just all of a sudden just put your arm around them or give them a hug without asking them first, because that may be something that's hard. And then Michelle just said, if the MCOT team cannot de-escalate the situation, or if they feel they are a harm to themselves or others, then they will help navigate that. And I think that's what you really need to do, is just help somebody help you get through the rough waters.
And MCOT is there because they do not want like the sirens to show up and to really heighten and trigger a situation. So it is really that step before ambulance, fire, police, anyone else is called. So they, like I said, they come as plain clothes, plain car. There's no state logo or anything on them. Not even usually a badge ID. Sometimes it might just be the use badge ID, if anything. But yeah, they will come very calmly just to talk and discuss. And if things do need to escalate, they'll take the appropriate steps. But most of the time, they will not call police. Now, I have to preface, like, if a hostage situation or something really extreme begins to happen, that obviously warrants a police phone call. But if it is just to get someone mental health help, they'll either escort them themselves if they have the time and availability, or they can call an ambulance and escort the ambulance.
Are there any other questions or anything else that you would like us to help you navigate? And thank you so much. First and foremost, thank you so much for being boots on the ground for our YIC Youth in Care. Oh, I tell you, aren't they just incredible students? There's just, I've worked with so many students through the years, and they just leave footprints on your heart, and you're never the same.
All right, I'm not seeing any more comments in the chat, but I did want to ask or kind of add to Kim's questioning. So if I'm just playing devil's advocate, if MCOT wasn't available and you did have to call 911, could you say to them, please don't use the sirens, come calmly? I mean,
absolutely.
Okay.
You can absolutely request that, and they actually prefer that. I will be honest with you. If you call even just 911 dispatch and you just say, hey, this is, a mental health thing, or someone's kind of in need, they prefer to hear like, the situation is calm, please come calmly.
And if you have to request the police, or if the police are dispatched, you can request a policeman that has like the crisis, is it CIT? CIT train.
Yeah, crisis intervention training. Those are police officers who have been through mental health specific training and know how to de-escalate a crisis intervention. They have been trained by certified clinicians. So they also are, you can request them if they are available, and they will also come, more calmly and without all the sirens and everything else.
Right.
So just request a CIT officer. That was a great ad, Cathy. Sure.
Yeah. This is a situation, I've had many situations with my son. He's going to celebrate 2 years of sobriety in May on Mother's Day. Isn't that a great sobriety date? Mother's Day. So I love that he did that. And that he's just threading one day into the next. And that's what our kids are doing. They're just trying to thread one day into the next, and they'll realize that once they just keep threading these days into the next, they will have this fabric, but their fabric comes unraveled. And so you have to teach them how to stitch that day back into the next again. And, sometimes you have to do back stitches, and it's okay. And that's what I say with my daughter all the time. It's okay. We can do this, because I've been driving for 40 years and I still make mistakes on the road all the time. I drive so slow and all of that. So grade yourself on the curve, give yourself grace, folks. These are hard times. So give yourself a lot of grace.
I would add to that, Cathy. I think that's something that, I think we often forget, is that everybody's going through craziness right now, and you're allowed to feel stressed out, but, don't join them in it just the same as some of the rest of us say. So any other questions or specific circumstances or conversation about, issues with direct kids, anything like that going on we want to chat about? We've got about 15 minutes.
Well, this is me. Kind of wanted to share a story. We had a boy who was living with a family for 2 years, and they were going to adopt him, and the father had diabetes, and he died from his diabetes. It was a long, slow death. And after he died, this boy didn't know what to do with himself. Started taking drugs. He even stole drugs to sell from the family medicine chest. And the mother said, I can't tolerate you. You can't be trusted anymore. And so she said she wasn't going to adopt him anymore. And this kid came to me and told me that. And I stood there and looked at him, and I had no idea. What do you say to that? What do you say? And I said, you know what? I'm not allowed to give you a hug, but I am going to break the rules, and I'm going to give you a hug, because I don't know what else to tell you, except that you are not evil. You made a mistake. And he admitted that. He said, I don't know why I did it. It just was a stupid mistake. He was self-medicating, I guess. Anyway, so when you talk about, I worry, how far into these kids' lives, my grandma and me wants to grab them and give them a hug and say, it's going to be okay. But this was a good training, helping you find out, well, what do you say to these kids? And I'm glad she said, ask him if you can hug him. And he was okay with that. And he's okay. He's been taken in by another foster family, but I didn't even think about it being a suicide situation. He never said the words, but he was in a really bad place. That was very, very hard. So I'm glad you gave us this training.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And thank you for validating him and his pain and where he's going through, because all behavior has purpose, and substance use has a purpose. It serves a purpose. Kids smoke weed to ease their anxiety until it doesn't ease their anxiety anymore. So there's a lot of different things going on in that space. But really, I think the only thing that you can do is help them problem solve, give them the skills and the coping strategies. And then just one thing that was struck to me with your story is I believe that student probably needs to know that what was going on with the mother that said that, she just lost her husband. So it's a grief response, and anger comes out in grief all the time. So just separate out what's hers and what's his, and what he has conscious control of and what he can do something about.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for the reminder, Cathy, that, the parent did lash out in anger. I think sometimes it's good to be reminded of the stages of grief. I did that with my kids recently, and well, not recently, but we had an issue a while back, and there was lots of anger in the house, and we realized it was due to grief. And once we all just addressed it and talked about the fact that we were dealing with it, I think that helped us to get that piece of closure and move forward. But I took note because my 16-year-old was like, well, I'm so glad that, you told me you were mad too, because I thought it was just me. So it was really validating to him that it was a normal emotion, and that the emotion was tied to the grief, not what the anger was actually taken out on. So I appreciate that. All right, well, we do have a few more minutes. If anybody else has any specific questions or a conversation they want to have. Otherwise, we can do that thing where we get some time back in our day. Maybe take a short 15-minute break. Those things do exist. I know as educators, we forget that. Okay, so it looks like we do have some thanks on the chat. So, okay, I just wanted to make sure that wasn't a question. So with that, my friends, I think we will call it. I appreciate everybody taking time out of their day, especially our presenters, Nate, Michelle, and Cathy. And, but everybody, I know this is a big ask in the middle of a morning to carve out some time to learn together. So I really appreciate it. As usual, the recording will get posted within about a week and be on both the YouTube site as well as the USBE homepage. And in the follow-up, I will send the post-training survey. And I really appreciate you guys taking a few minutes to fill that out. So thank you so much, everybody.
And thank you, Amanda. You do such a spectacular job. Just want to tell you that.
Well, thank you. It's definitely, like I said a little earlier, sometimes they're heavy topics, but this is always something I'm really happy to help provide for the mentors and the staff who participate. So thank you, everybody.